So today, damage conversion. What is it, why is it, and how is it? It is a mechanic that changes the damage type from a hit. This is very important. I actually didn't know this explicitly. Like I kind of thought this and understood it, but it is only from hits into another damage type. Damage conversions do not apply to damage over time. I didn't know this too explicitly. And in fact, what I did is I went into Path of Building. I took Vortex and I put Cold to Fire support in here. And I went to the Calcs tab, and you can see the skill hit damage is converting a good amount of that cold and doing extra cold as fire for the on hit of Vortex. But you can see the damage over time effect is not influenced whatsoever. Only the on hit is affected by the conversion there. So, you know, if you want to do any like really funky stuff there and you're trying to do that with damage over time, you just cannot do it. Mechanics, damage conversion is done before any increases or multipliers are applied to damage, guaranteeing that they are only applied once. In any sort of set of calculations in Path of Exile, it happens necessarily, right? It goes down a pipeline. This is done very necessarily at the very beginning so that there's no funny business in the middle as multipliers and increases are happening. However, converted damage is affected by modifiers that apply to both the original damage type it was converted from and the new damage type that it was converted to. Damage conversion is used by modifiers on skills, passive skills, equipment, and monsters. It comes in two main forms: percent of damage converted to damage type and percent of damage added as damage type, or gain percent of damage type as extra. The difference between these forms is the effect that they have on the original damage. Converted replaces the original damage with the new damage, while added as preserves the original damage, adding the new damage to the total. These two modifiers do not interfere with one another in any way. Conversion is applied on your character to your damage stats, which have minimum and maximum values. You can see that this happens because you can see the min and max values of each type are already calculated on your skill, accounting for conversion. For example, I love examples. These are the best things. Assuming that you convert physical 50% to cold and 50% to lightning, there will be enough variance in damage ranges to alternate which damage type is higher, enabling the use of Trinity support. So if you do 1 to 10 physical damage and you have 50% cold and 50% lightning, so it'll be like cold min max looks like 1 times 0.5 and 10 times 0.5 equals 1 through 5. Okay, so we create our new cold and lightning min and maxes, and then when the damage is done, then we roll the min max 1 through 5 cold and 1 through 5 lightning independently, which allows us to use Trinity support. Because it can then combine with your added damage for the final roll on the damage dealing. So that is what ensures that those two mechanics, the conversion and the added as, don't have an interaction with each other, right? So that's why it's done like this. That makes a lot of sense. Converted to. For this type of modifier, the original damage is replaced with the converted damage. The amount of any given damage type that can be converted cannot exceed 100%. It normalizes the scaling. So if you have 150% converted to cold and 150% converted to lightning, it normalizes them percentage based against each other. If it's 150 and 150, it just normalizes to 50-50. It's just a proportion between each other when it exceeds 100%. There's nothing like really crazy that you have to worry about there. There's no like added as or anything that can happen, but you can't over convert. So it just simplifies it. If the combined value for any given type is greater than 100, the values are scaled so the total is 100. Conversion from skill gems take priority over conversion from other sources such as equipment and is not scaled. The game does not distinguish between damage converted by passives and by gear. This may be of some importance when dealing with Avatar of Fire. If you're using like Ice Crash with Avatar of Fire, you're going to be in a little bit of a world of hurt there, right? Because Ice Crash, I believe, is 100% conversion, right? If you're looking to convert the fizz, passives or anything, it's already got 100% conversion to cold damage, and that's going to override. You can convert the cold to fire. Yeah, you could do fire ice crash. You could convert it afterwards because cold can still go into fire, which we're about to see. Look at this. Perfect transition. Damage conversion only flows in one direction, but you can go in that direction, right? So, or we go to physical to ice, physical to cold with ice crash. It has a 100% conversion to cold no matter what. But from that cold, we can then transition cold into fire or chaos. But the gem conversion will always override. And it can never go in reverse, right? So that's why, for purposes of conversion, physical is so damn strong. Not only is it because there's a ton of sources of fizz as extra, fizz converted into other sources, but then when it goes down the line, you could then, fizz can turn into lightning. You can do lightning as extra into cold. You can do, lightning into cold into fire. But once you're down in fire, you can only go into chaos. And then there's so few sources in the game of transitioning into chaos. It's like almost a special condition. If you start from a fire as a source, you're just not going to be playing in a damage conversion world. Whereas physical or lightning tend to do a lot of damage conversion. Not so much these days with people doing pure lightning, but very traditionally, Call of the Brotherhood rings, lightning to cold. You can combine those with cold as fire gem and even do additional conversion there if you really want to. If you want to look at some of the highest damaging skills in the game, most of them will start with a physical base, whether it's a spell like Blade Vortex, we can name like the things that are really, really strong, like Tornado Shot, Ice Shot, Lightning Arrow, Blade Vortex, Blade Fall, Blade Blast. All these guys, they start from physical or just have partial conversion built into them, and you can then do fizz as extra, lightning into cold, stuff like that. And anything that has especially physical or lightning, they're just gonna have more conversion, more access to tools that allow them to get more damage. And that's why it can be kind of uncomfortable and harder to get those like really high, crazy scaling skills if they start with just fire. For an example, a player is wielding a bow that deals 100 physical damage. It's using a black gleam cleaver, 50% physical converted to fire damage, and Hrimsarrow gloves that have 50%. This is old. Modern Hrimsarrow are 100%. 50% physical damage converted to cold. The player is using Lightning Arrow, which has 50% physical damage converted to lightning. The total in this example is 100% 50 of physical damage and must be scaled. Since it comes from a skill gem, Lightning Arrow's modifier takes priority and is not scaled. No matter what, that Lightning Arrow's modifier is locked in. 50% of the physical damage is just reserved for that conversion on the gem. The other two, however, are scaled proportionally and convert the remaining 50% of physical damage. So that just ends up being 50-50, and you get 25% of the final damage being fire and 25% being cold. In summary, the resulting converted damage would be 50 lightning, 25 fire, 25 cold, and 0% physical because it is all fully converted. Gained as extra. This modifier does not replace the original damage. Instead, it takes a portion of the damage and adds it to the total as a different damage type. Damage added in this way can exceed 100% of the source damage type and does not need to be scaled. Players wielding a 100 physical damage bow with the same setup, Black Gleam, Hrimsarrow, Old Hrimsarrow's Lightning Arrow. The Lightning Arrow is supported by added fire damage support, which has 25% fizz added as fire. The result of the converted two modifiers is the same. The amounts are scaled to a total of 100% as normal. The added fire damage adds an additional 25%. So the final damage, so it takes just the original physical damage before conversions, is we have 100 physical damage. Lightning Arrow is 50% lightning. Then we have Hrimsarrow, which the old Hrimsarrow, 50% cold. Then we have the Black Gleam, which is 50% fire. And then we have an added as fire gem with 25% fizz as fire. Since there's nothing in here that interacts with this conversion path, is we can start with physical, right? It's doing 100 physical off the bat. Here, the added as will pull off, multiplies by the added as fire. This will just give us 25 fire. And then we do the conversions. Then we have 100% one physical converted as above into 50 lightning reserved, right? Reserved from gem. And then we have remaining 50 physical, which is then split between 50% cold and 50% fire, which then turns into 25 cold, 25 fire damage. So for at the end, right, we have 25 fire from the gem, gives us 50 total fire, 25 cold, and 50 lightning. Imagine if we had a passive that said 10% of non-chaos as extra chaos in here, right? Remember, going down the line, physical, lightning, cold. This is worth memorizing. Absolutely. I think this is pretty important to memorize. Physical, lightning, cold, fire, chaos, right? This is the line that conversion goes in. 10% of non-chaos is extra chaos. If you had this in your build, right, that we had this with the old trickster node, right? We have 100 physical. The damage that you have exists as it's doing the conversion down the line, right? So it exists, and it pull the non-chaos as extra will pull off as it's converting down the line. So we have 100 physical that ends up with 50 lightning, 25 cold, 50 fire, and starts off with 0 chaos. However, every time that it goes down the line of the conversion, the non-chaos as chaos will be pulling off. Since we have 10% of non-chaos as extra chaos, this will turn into 10 chaos damage, 5 chaos damage, 2, it will always round down, 2 chaos damage, 5 fire damage, for a total of 22 chaos damage after all of the conversions. This is the beauty of something like non-chaos as extra chaos, or with Eternity Shroud, which is elemental as chaos. So this will actually end up giving us 22 chaos from the non-chaos as extra chaos as it's doing the conversions down the line, which is pretty sick. And that's why the old Trickster node was so cool. It was really hard to build around, but you can do this with Eternity Shroud as well. If you convert through all of the different elements, Eternity Shroud will give you 5% of non-elemental damage, or of elemental damage as chaos damage through the entire conversion line. When you see some of these like very high scaling builds, I actually don't know all of the modern Headhunter Arch Nemesis mods today, but the old reason why Headhunter back in the day before Arch Nemesis was so ridiculously strong, particularly around physical bow skills, is because there were auras that you got that gave you fizz as extra and additional projectiles. So you'd shoot like 1,000,000 arrows, but you'd get these stacking fizz as extra elemental auras that would just give you, it would be off your initial physical damage from your bow of your bow skill. It would just be giving you additional auras stacking over and over and over again. And you would literally do, effectively infinite damage in the game as you stacked those auras. Before we move on, hopefully, after what we just talked about, this will help you understand why Hatred is the strongest damage aura in the game. It just is, period. What does Hatred do? 25% of physical as extra cold damage. You and nearby allies deal 18% more cold damage. These interact with each other separately. So your initial 25% physical damage, just add 25 of that as cold damage. Also, all of the cold damage that you end up doing also gets an 18% more damage multiplier. So you get both. Hatred literally double dips if you are doing particularly a physical into cold damage build. It is very, very strong. Now, with that said, if you are not starting from a physical base, Hatred's pretty weak. I see a lot of people doing builds like, oh, I'm doing Vortex. I'm just doing Cold Vortex. I'm doing Winter Orb, anything like that. If you're not starting from a physical base, you're just taking advantage of the 18 more cold damage. Just an 18% more damage multiplier is actually pretty weak in all things considered. Hatred becomes broken when you start from a physical base and you're doing damage conversion, particularly if you're doing damage conversion primarily into cold. However, if you're just doing like Winter Orb, right? Something like Zealotry, if we move over here, 15% more spell damage, so only a little bit less on that single more multiplier, and you get other benefits with something like Zealotry. It's the same amount of reservation, and it can interact in other ways. It's not just cold damage. It's all of your spell damage. It has crit. It gives you consecrated ground, etc. Don't just like use hatred because you know that hatred is good. Use hatred when you know why it's good. That's what we're here to help you understand. If you get aura effect, like if you have 50% aura effect on hatred, right? This 18 turns to 27% more cold damage. And also, this will help you understand if you get more aura effect, why people are stacking it so much these days. If you have 50% aura effect, this will turn to 37% as extra. This will turn to 27% more cold damage. They double dip with each other. What? How broken is this hatred aura? What? Damage taken as, very importantly, has the first line right here. Not to be confused with damage conversion or damage taken. Damage taken as is, yeah. How do you know this is Path of Exile? Damage taken as, not to be confused with damage taken. These are two different things. Welcome to Path of Exile. Damage taken as is a mechanic that allows damage from one damage type to be taken as another damage type. Most of these modifiers specify they only apply to hits. A few rarer sources also apply to damage over time. On the receiving side, damage may be taken as a different type. This is done before any sort of mitigation. Order does matter. It is important to note that this is not damage conversion. The shifted part of damage does not retain its original damage property. So when we were looking at damage conversion, the big thing here is they retained their original properties. We were able to still take non-chaos as chaos, right? We were able to, pull off of like non-chaos as chaos or elemental as non-elemental. When it's shifted in damage taken as, if you have 100% physical taken as fire, it is just taken as fire. There is no interaction with that taken as physical. Like your armor will not interact with it if you have physical converted, if you have it shifted in taken as. So there's no complexity or shenanigans here. If anything, damage taken as is a lot simpler. So it won't get mitigated twice or by the more favorable method. For example, if some of the incoming damage is shifted to or from physical, the post-shift value is used in the armor calculation. So damage taken as is calculated simultaneously. This means that the incoming damage can be shifted to any other damage type. For example, the rat cage has % of fire taken as fizz. This modifier wouldn't have worked if it was a converted to process. So it is just fully shifted over. Don't worry about like the extra conversions or retaining the old properties. I just want to like hammer that home. Since damage taken as does all calculations simultaneously, this also means that the initial damage cannot be shifted between damage types more than once, preventing a loop. For example, with the Cloak of Flame and Avian Twins talismans with % fire taken as lightning, the incoming physical damage will be shifted to fire damage, but the fire damage cannot be further shifted to lightning damage. Because both of these operations would be performed simultaneously on the initial physical damage hit, so we'd be trying to take fire as lightning before any fire damage exists. Shifting damage does not count as preventing the original damage type. So physical damage taken as fire would be considered fire, so you can't use something like Divine Shield. I was talking about this a little bit earlier on the stream today. It's very important to, take into account all of these different things. For example, if, the simple example would be if you have a flask that gives you flask charges when you take a hit, and, usually you'll build up like a lot of armor. You just want to be tanky and take those hits. If you get evasion, right, that will be countering your assumption that you're taking those hits and getting those flask charges. Very similarly, if you have something like, I don't know, gain % of fire damage taken as life over time or something like that, then but you converted the fire damage that you take, all incoming fire damage taken as cold damage or something, then you just wouldn't be taking that fire damage at all. It doesn't retain that original property. This mechanic is useful against elemental penetration. For a real world example here, Uber Shaper, his lightning balls have very, very high lightning pen. I think it's lightning pen. It might be lightning and cold or whatever. Let's just say lightning. Very, very high lightning pen. And even if you have 90 lightning res, oh, that sucks. It's just going to be penetrating a lot of it. And, if it has like 50 lightning pen, you're taking so much damage. Your 90 max res is doing nothing. So doing almost nothing. But If you have 50% of lightning taken as chaos or something, and you have max chaos res, then you're able to just like mitigate that penetration by converting it to something that you get your full resistance against. Also, very similarly, something like spell suppression helps a ton there. Like anything that has that like flat percentage mitigation that doesn't have any penetration against it is really, really good. Look at this, Shaper's Projectiles. I guess it was Cold Pen. Sorry, not Lightning Pen, it was Cold. I was very close. If you manage to convert 100% of the penetrated element into another element, then you can completely nullify the effect of penetration, right? I think this is a really good example. Let's go to the most important tool that we have, writing down exemplary tooltips or exemplary numbers here. So if we have 100 cold damage coming in with 100, let's just say 75 pen, right? 100 cold damage coming in with 75 pen. We have 75 cold res and 75 lightning res. Normally, we take 100 cold damage. Sad. With no pen, this is only 25 damage, right? With 75 res, we take 25 damage. With 75 pen, it goes through all 75 of our res, and we take all 100 damage. However, with 100% cold taken as lightning, cold is taken entirely as lightning. So 100 cold damage just turns into, is fully shifted, does not retain the fact that it was cold damage. It is not cold. It doesn't even remember that it was cold damage. We're just taking 100 lightning damage now, right? That goes against our 75 lightning res. We take 25 damage as if there were no penetration whatsoever. How sick is that? Taking damage as cold or lightning damage will allow the portion of damage taken as those elements to chill you or shock, freeze, sap, brittle if you have a chance to have those ailments applied to you. So do be careful. If you have like lightning taken as cold and you don't have immunity to chill or freeze, you can actually turn lightning damage into freezing you, which can be a little uncomfortable if you don't deal with that. Or vice versa. If you have, physical taken as lightning, you can actually just make physical damage shock you, which can be very unfortunate. Damaging ailments, on the other hand, are based on the damage dealt, not the damage taken, so you don't have to worry about things like ignite, which is great. Bleeding can only be applied by physical attack damage. Secondary damage will never apply bleeding. So if you convert all incoming physical damage to elemental, you don't have to worry about bleeding anymore, which is pretty cool. Cloak of Flame has a rare damage taken as property. This applies generically to both physical hits and damage over time. E.g. bleed and corrupted blood. Unlike Lightning Coil, which says very specifically from hits. Like, this is the key. You have to, like, generically, if it says taken as, it's anything. It's damage over time. It's whatever. That's why things like flat damage reduction, flat physical damage reduction, fizz taken as something else, if it doesn't say for hits, really good, as I was just saying a second ago, against bleeds and stuff like that. However, the most common forms of this modifier that you will see do say from hits. Just don't mess that up when you're gearing your character and think that you have like, oh, I have all physical damage converted, and then you end up bleeding and you're like, what the hell is happening? Be very careful about the wording of the words here. Things like Divine Flesh is a really good thing to show as well. 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos damage. So this is a cool thing that you can do where what you would try to do is aim for like 90 chaos res, and then 50% of the elemental damage taken would go against your 90 res. If we have 100 elemental damage incoming, we have Divine Flesh. Remember, damage taken as is shifted before any mitigation. 50 taken as elemental, 50 taken as chaos. So we have 50 taken as elemental, 50 taken as chaos. So 50 damage times 0.25 against our 75 res, right? 50 times 0.25, we are going to take 12.5 elemental damage taken because we just have 75 res. However, 50 times 0.2 for 80 res, we only take 10 chaos damage taken. So instead of taking 25 damage, we take 22.5 damage. We take 10% less damage. 10% less damage taken is huge, right? If a 10,000 damage hit comes in, we only take 9,000 damage. That can be the difference between life or death, right? Now, let's see how crazy this gets with 85 chaos res. We still take the same amount of initial elemental damage taken. This is 12.5 no matter what. But This 50 damage gets multiplied times 0.15 is we only take 7.5 damage here for a total of 20 damage taken. For 20% less damage taken. From going from 80 to 85 chaos res for all incoming elemental damage, we go from 10% to 20% less damage taken across the board, both hits and dots, hard to beat. But yeah, anyway, hopefully this was instructive enough for you guys. And it was enough information. If there's any other questions, let me know. This is a topic that I've been meaning to tackle for a while, and I'm glad that we did it today.